Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Purposeful Conversations with me, Emmy, here in the Pame Code Facebook community. And for today, we're going to talk about something different in our conversation today because, we've always been talking about resilience. We've been talking about mindset stuff and courage and so on. But I figured, let's talk about something that would take us out of the box. And I came across our guest today, and it really resonated with me. So in her bio, I saw that she's a fourth degree black belter. So it's like ping, ping, ping. It was like, ooh, really interesting. And from what I've seen is that she helps women balance power. And for today, we are going to talk about self-defense and how it's more than just kicking and punching. So I'm really interested with what she has to say about this because I know for sure that as far as self-defense is concerned, there's more to it than just the physical. There's a lot of emotional power and, all these encouragement stuff going on when you're learning and practicing self-defense. So without further ado, let's all welcome Cynthia Joliceur Rood. Hi, Cynthia.
Hi, Emee, and hello to your community. I'm so happy to be here today.
I'm really excited to talk to you today because when I saw your bio, I was really impressed with your background. I was fascinated by your energy actually and how passionate you are about power, about empowering women and how you're tapping into self-defense as well to unleash this for women. So before we get into that, let's just talk about yourself first. Who you are, what do you do, and how did you get into this area?
Okay, well, it's a long story, so I'll keep it kind of short.
Oh, don't
But
worry, we
yeah,
have time.
yeah, I for 30 years I lived in Silicon Valley and raised my family, and a couple years ago moved completely out and moved up into the wilderness in the foothills of Northern California. So to get to my house now, you actually have to drive through a creek and up a long dirt road, and I'm very isolated, so it's totally different. Which, if we talk a little bit later on about how you develop courage, I got a really great opportunity to exercise that in that big move. And along the way, when I was raising my kids, I got into martial arts. But the reason why I did is that way back when I was in my, gosh, probably early 20s, like 21 or 22, I lived in Tampa, Florida. And as most youngsters like to do, I liked to go out with my friends and have fun and go dancing and things like that. And one night, my friends and I came out of a club probably around 1 o'clock in the morning. And as we were walking back to our car, we were confronted by two men with guns who forced us down an alley and like onto the ground and who took everything that we had.
Wow.
So, got mugged at gunpoint in my early 20s. And that experience of being in a situation where I was completely unprepared. Like, I had no idea what to do other than just comply. And afterwards, I didn't know what to do because in my 20s, I didn't want to go to a martial arts program. I didn't like the whole vibe, that it was very dominated by men and it was
Mm.
totally focused on fighting. And I didn't think that would have really helped in the situation that I'd been in.
Mm.
So I just kind of blithely thought, well, I hope that was the one bad incident of my life and that I'll be okay from now on. And I just kind of ignored the fact that I still wasn't prepared. And I bumbled along for quite a while until in my late 20s, I started having children, and my oldest son was kind of this big bundle of uncontrollable energy. And my husband enrolled him at the local martial arts school. And I
Wow.
sat there watching him with my little daughter and my big belly because I was pregnant.
Mm.
And I just thought, well, this is actually pretty interesting. It's
Yeah.
not what I thought it was, 10 years ago. I actually kind of like this. And so when I had my third child, I took a sabbatical from my job and was like, what am I going to do? I want to be around adults. I want to do something where I feel like I'm getting accomplishments. Pardon me. And so I enrolled as a white belt at that martial arts school. And, here we are 24 years later. And I went all the way through 4th-degree black belt with that particular program. And like along the way, I thought that I was learning the stuff that I could have used back in my early 20s where I was in that situation. And the more I did, the more I thought, well, this is fun and it's great physical activity and I'm getting in good shape and I'm feeling powerful. But I don't think I could do any of this stuff like in the middle of the night, taken by surprise and scared.
Mm.
And so I started looking for, like, is there anybody out there who can teach me, like, how do you manage your fear when you're in a situation like that? And how can you like avoid being in a situation like that? Like, what are the warning signs that I could have noticed and listened to that would have kept me safe? And fortunately, I ran across somebody, and now I've run across several people who do that work of reality-based, like real world violent encounter based scenario
Mm.
training. And that just totally lit me up. I was like, I mean, I love my martial arts, obviously, because I kept on doing it. But I want to know in the real world, if I'm in a situation and there's something that doesn't feel quite right, how can I get out of that situation? Can I learn how to de escalate things if I'm in a confrontation? And if I have to fight for my life, like, how can I do that with what I've got as a human being? Because I know that in the moment, all of these complex memorized
Mm.
sequences that I learned in all my martial arts stuff, they're just not there. They're not available. So I
Mm.
was really lucky to find people who actually had that kind of training. And that's, I just dove like full bore into that. And the more I learned, the more I knew, the more I thought, well, I can't just sit on this and have this be just what I know, because we all should know this. We should learn this as we're growing up. We should learn, how do you be safe in the world? Because there are dangers out there. There are threats. There are people who don't have good intentions. And we don't learn about that.
Mm.
And for
It's
me, that just breaks
fascinating
my
how,
heart.
yeah, it's you're so you're so it lights you up, you know, you're so
Yes.
passionate. You're so passionate about it because from your story you actually did experience something yourself, and I suspect that it was quite, you know, it was frightening to have that experience and for you to go through this journey. Even at first you had some reluctance, you know, going into martial arts and seeing that it's not really just about the physical, you know, there's, I assume that you saw the self discipline there, and how you can actually control your energy as well.
Yes, I did. I think the biggest benefits of the martial arts for me were developing that self discipline to actually practice something and to
Mm.
work really hard to become very skillful at a particular thing. And where the mismatch happened is that in a situation where you are scared and where there is the potential for real violence, the way our brains work, that kind of stuff, the cognitive part just isn't available in that
Mm.
moment. It's just what happens to us naturally. We have a part of our whole body and brain that are designed to keep us safe, and it just kind of takes over. And so what I learned was that if I could learn how to be very comfortable trusting my body and my brain in that instant to kind of get me through the first few moments, then I could get to all these wonderful things that I developed with the martial arts.
Yeah.
And that's where like my mastery of all of those incredible techniques and tools was super valuable. But the piece that got added in was like, you don't have to learn fancy techniques because your body's actually designed to protect you anyway. So
Mm.
we have elbows, we have knees, we have hands, we can do all kinds of things with those. We've been so domesticated, we don't actually realize how powerful we are and how well equipped we already are. And so while I loved all of the discipline of the martial arts and the creativity of doing things like creating open forms and weapons forms and putting them to music and that kind of stuff, like that was so much fun. And yet, it doesn't serve if you're in a home invasion or if you're on a date and the the guy you're out on a date with wants to go a different direction than you do, or if you're in a college dorm and somebody surprises you in your room or something. Like, in those situations, those beautiful flashy skills aren't very useful,
Yes, and so
whereas the
you're
scenario
making it
training
really,
is.
you're making it really applicable and practical to those scenarios. And when you actually have the set of moves, I don't know, when you have the knowledge, the know-how, understanding that you have that
Yeah.
in your toolkit, if you like, at least you are prepared, should the situation arise, than having nothing at all. Because yeah, you are right, when it comes to our brain's natural response to threatening circumstances, we have the fight, flight, freeze, flop response. And sometimes when you don't have those skills and knowledge to um to to do what you have to do in that threatening situation, frequently we just freeze. You see people in stressful situations, they just freeze, they just don't know what to do, they sort of black out and just, as you've said, you basically just comply. But for those who have the knowledge and skills stored in their brain, then they will have the opportunity to respond to it based on what they know would be effective to fight. So you have that
Yes.
choice.
Yes, and actually, like, you hit on something really, really, really important there, because even right at the beginning of the conversation, you're saying, like, self-defense is not just about the fight. It's not just about the physical part. And what you're touching on is how important mindset is. And so, like, when I work with people, we talk about things like listening to your instincts and intuition, because every victim of violence will tell you, I had a bad feeling before it happened.
Yes.
I mean, I even did in that situation where I got mugged. I actually saw the guys come around the corner, and I made a little joke to my friends and said, "Oh, don't worry, I've got a gun," which I didn't. I mean, I'd never even seen or touched one at the time, but I clearly picked up that it was dangerous. So every
Mm,
victim of violence has that bad feeling. And the unfortunate thing is that as
they
human
don't
beings, we are
follow it.
super domesticated and we can rationalize it away. We come up with all kinds of reasons why it's probably not true. So we talk a lot about listening to your instincts and intuition, and actually giving yourself permission to take action when you get that uncomfortable feeling. Giving yourself permission is huge, because as women, like, we don't like to get called a bitch or racist or crazy, or we don't like to be told we're overreacting and all of that kind of thing. And so we try to, like, not cause a fuss, not draw attention, not do things that might potentially draw that kind of comment to us. But sometimes, like, we prioritize that fear of being criticized or
Mm,
labeled over our own safety. So we have to give ourselves permission. Like, if we need to turn around and say, "Hey, are you following me?"
mm,
We need to be comfortable doing that and not worry about, maybe the dude's not actually following us. He just happens to be going the same way, right?
yeah,
But
yeah.
a good person will just say, "Oh, sorry, lady, didn't mean to upset you." So we have to give ourselves permission. But the other piece of mindset that you touched on is, it's very hard to get into action if you don't know what the cost of not taking action is. And
Mm,
so we talk a lot about what could it cost you if you're in a situation and you don't know what to do, and you don't know what it could cost not just you, but your loved ones. What difference does it make that you're here on the planet, that you have something to do in the world? What difference does it make to the people who love you? Like, if you didn't survive this because you didn't take action, what would happen with them? Like, what
mm,
if you ended up in the hospital in a coma for 30 years? What if you just disappeared and nobody knew what happened to you forever?
mm,
And those are real things that happen with people. And so when we talk about, like, giving ourselves permission and knowing what it what it, like, what difference it makes that you actually survive, that can be incredibly helpful with being in a situation and actually getting out of that freeze moment.
That's right.
The other piece, like, I don't want to totally flood you, but the other piece is that we create mental blueprints. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just basically like software for the brain. So we will talk about a specific scenario and say, okay, in this situation, what could you do? You know, come up with possible solution number one. Okay, what other thing could you do? You know, possible solution number two. And so we create these mental blueprints of potential solutions to scenarios. And even if we don't actually do a training where we actually do those scenarios, the actual process of thinking it through stores that information in your brain. And so if you're
Mm.
ever in a scenario that is similar, doesn't have to be exactly the same, but it's similar,
You
your
have
brain
the
just goes click, click,
blueprint.
I got it.
That's right.
And
That's right. And
that's huge.
I actually love that you actually spoke about intuition first of all. That's really important. And for me, now that I learn about energy and learning how to actually respect what your body tells you, if you have like a really bad feeling about this, you actually need to listen to it and acknowledge that this is how your body is responding to the energy around you. So that's really important. And the second thing that you mentioned is like the brain's blueprint and so on. The thing is, when I wrote my book, Fear is Not My Enemy, I talk about how fear is not your enemy. Essentially, your brain is telling you that there's a potential risk, that there's a
Yeah.
potential danger, and the way you respond to the risk, because you're being triggered by fear, it's not a bad thing. It's a signal to tell you that there is a potential risk. You need to be able to assess the risk, your ability to manage the risk, and the
Mm-hmm.
consequences of action or inaction. So that's something that you touched on a couple of minutes ago, that bit about the consequence of action or inaction, because and also your ability to manage the risk, because that will inform how you're going to respond to it. So there's a lot of cognitive and primitive processing going on. Obviously, your primitive brain will respond first. You'll have your automatic your autonomic nervous system responding first. The
Yep.
physiological response will happen, and then your cognitive brain will respond next, because it's assessing, do I have the ability to manage this risk, and what would be the consequences of me doing something or that or the other. So it's, yeah, there's a lot of brain stuff going on. That's why you're right. It's not just kicking and punching. There's a lot of processing going on in there.
There is. You are so absolutely right. I just like amen to all of what you just
Yeah.
said. Yeah, for sure. And you're right that fear is a true gift. And the thing that we can do is we can start to learn what are typical behaviors of people who are actually trying to do something that could be threatening to us. I mean, one of the reasons why we get blindsided is because we just don't recognize the behaviors and the warning signs. And we're getting that little warning signal. That's that, it's not always like just I feel scared. It can be I feel doubt or anxiety, or I've got butterflies in my stomach,
Mm,
or something just feels off, but I'm not sure what.
mm.
That little warning thing is is the sign that we need to start getting really curious about, well, what actually is going on with this person, or what is it about this environment
Situation.
that maybe isn't right or normal. It might be different today than it usually is. So we need to start to learn like what to look for, what signs to look for, and then, as you said, learning how to navigate through the fear, because we do have the physiological response, and that's where learning how to do conscious breathing really,
Mm.
really helps. Because I mean, we can't think if we don't have any oxygen.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
And if we're in that stress response, it's we have a totally different set of options. But what we want to do is what you're talking about, which is getting, having our nervous system shift into the place where we can actually think. And so that conscious breathing really helps with that. But then beyond that, understanding, in Coach Tony Blauer's framework, he developed this incredible system called the neuroscience of, or the neurocircuitry of fear. Also, you'll see it if you Google it as a cycle of behavior. And it's really what happens mentally when we are in a situation where we feel fear. So we get a fear spike, we visualize things, we have certain beliefs that come into play, and we start feeling that anxiety, doubt, nervousness, unease. And we go into these things, and you've seen those acronyms of false expectations appearing real or false evidence appearing real. And that's, if you look at those things and start to question, like, is this really true? Is it real? What I'm visualizing, are the beliefs that I'm holding true? Like, for example, for me, when that thing happened with the muggers, one of the beliefs that I had was, if I get shot, I'm going to die. That's a really common one. That's actually a false belief. I mean, there's bazillions of people who have been shot who haven't died, but it can be a paralyzing belief, right? So you got to work through those beliefs and the visualizations that you have. And you reach a point basically where it's, am I going to continue to feel threatened by what's going on? Or am I going to make the choice to feel challenged and say, okay, rather than, oh my gosh, what's happening? Why is this happening to me? This can't be real. You know, rather than being in what we call the fear loop, get challenged and start saying, okay, there's something I can do. What would be a good thing for me to do? And coming up with a plan, like, where do I want to get to? What result do I want? And how might I get there? And when we make that choice to be challenged rather than threatened, everything shifts. And as you know, when you take one action, your brain sort of feeds on that. It's like, oh, okay, well, now we're in action.
This is what we're doing.
Yeah, so now I've got more ideas about follow-on things that I can do. And I mean, honestly, anytime you do one thing, it changes the scenario, right? So it'll open up more opportunities. And so you just get into that process of, okay, what can I do now? Okay, what can I do now? What can I do now? And in a self-defense situation, you want to keep going through that until you get yourself to safety. But in life, I mean, we have fear about everything in life. We're afraid to ask for a raise. We're afraid to go out on a date. You know, we're afraid to leave our corporate jobs and go out and be entrepreneurs. And so if we learn how to navigate through fear like this, we can do anything, because we won't get stuck in that fear loop of constantly feeling threatened and like we can't successfully do it.
That's absolutely, that's certainly something that's one of the main messages of my book, you know, Fear is Not My Enemy, because when you actually recognize fear and you know how to navigate that emotion and how you could actually use the fear, not to paralyze you, but to actually give you informed decisions on what you need to do about it. Because the fear is there because there are potential risks. Obviously, that's why you are sensing it. But if you know what you need to do, if you have the courage, if you have the skill set, and you know if you are prepared to handle the risks, or at least you know you have the abilities to minimize the risk, then it opens up, you know, opportunities for you. And it's not just the physical danger, right? You know, as you've said, there are other things in life, you know, the same thing, you know, there are several scenarios that I talk about in my book, you know. So in the physical aspects, you know, I talked about domestic abuse, but the fear with the domestic abuse is not just the physical, you know, there's emotional, you know, there's like the financial implications, fear of judgment, and so on and so forth. So, you know, you know, taking a leap out of your job, you know, to pursue a new career, moving homes, all sorts of things in life can trigger fear, and it's not just the physical confrontation. So with self-defense, with martial arts, when you are able to understand the fear and to be able to control it and use the fear to not to paralyze you but to help you to make informed decisions, then you know it works out. You know, fear is not your enemy because it actually helps you in the long run.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I can tell you one thing. I'm going to have to grab a copy of your book because it sounds awesome.
I'm sure you know, if you read it, you'll be nodding along because
Yeah.
you know, from what we've talked about today, it's really understanding your, well, how your body reacts as well. You know, we talk about the physiological automatic response of your body to fear, because that's your primitive brain. But your more evolved brain, your prefrontal cortex, all the beliefs, the memories, the knowledge, it's there. So you need to actually tap into that. How are you assessing the risk? How are you assessing your ability to handle the risk and the consequences of action and inaction? All of those mental, cognitive processes will inform how you're going to respond to the fear, regardless of it's a physical threat, an emotional, financial, whatever kind of threat it is. Your response will be dependent on how your prefrontal cortex is processing it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you're spot on.
And Cynthia, if I know that your training is quite it's rigorous, and there are many steps that you'll have to consider. But if you're going to give us like a basic, like in a nutshell, what would you suggest for our listeners right now who are, for example, confronted by a threatening situation? Take us through the steps. Where do you start, and how does, what do you teach in your classes to make us better prepared for dangerous situations out
Mhm.
there?
Well, the very first thing is if you're feeling kind of not right about something, if you're getting some sort of a niggling, uncomfortable feeling that the situation is possibly not good, like just stop right there and assess it and ask yourself, what is it that's going on right now? Why am I feeling uneasy? And that's honoring that intuition, right? That is the absolutely essential starting place, because
Mm,
there is no downside when you get that warning, signal, no matter how it manifests for you. There's no downside to listening to that and getting curious and taking action based on that. Whereas
mm.
if you do what we commonly do and we dismiss it and
Ignore.
we rationalize it away and we
It's
say,
nothing.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
probably mistaken, or, my sister's boyfriend would never do that to me, or,
Mm.
I've been at this job for so long, they would never treat me like that. If
Oh,
you have those kinds of things, which is what we come up with, because we don't want to believe that there could be a threat. So we're super, super good at finding reasons why it couldn't possibly be true.
mm,
And so to dismiss it and rationalize it away like that, there can be really serious consequences to dismissing that warning sign. So step number one is just like realize you got to listen to that. The downside to ignoring it or dismissing it can be huge.
mm.
And the downside, the only downside to taking action, because you're valid, you're honoring that, is that you're safe,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
not a
yeah.
downside. That's just you're safe.
That's a really
Uh,
important message. So listen to your intuition, and yeah, respect that feeling. Okay, so don't just brush it away. Be curious, and
yeah,
yeah, just explore where is this feeling coming from? It's like, why am
right.
I feeling this way?
Exactly. The second thing is to get really comfortable with navigating through fear, like we talked about. I think we covered that pretty well, but get
The
really
breathing.
comfortable.
I loved when you mentioned the breathing. And now that you're mentioning that, be comfortable with the fear, you're also actually almost preparing yourself, to
You are. And so fear is an interesting thing, because there are ways to actually get comfortable being in a state of fear. And I'm not saying like tomorrow go skydiving, because that would be a pretty big thing for a lot of people.
mm,
But you could do something called stress inoculation, where rather than doing one ginormous thing, you can take one small step that feels a little uncomfortable, and then you take a slightly bigger step and a slightly bigger step. Like a really good example of that is how the Navy SEALs do their training.
mm.
They do, one of the things they have to learn how to do is to take all their breathing equipment that's totally disassembled and put it all back together again. And the goal is that they can do that underwater at the bottom of a pool.
Wow.
Well,
Okay.
if step one was, okay, jump in the pool, sit on the bottom and put all your gear back together again, everybody would fail,
Mm,
because they just
mm.
don't know. And so what they start with, oh, by the way, they're blindfolded when they're down there.
Whoa. Well, yeah,
Yeah,
in those circumstances, it's you can't really see anything.
Exactly. But that's not where they start. So they start with sitting on the side of the pool, broad daylight, eyes open, where they can see all the pieces, and they learn how to do it that way.
Mm.
And then, they may do it sitting on the side of the pool with their eyes closed, putting the pieces together. And then they might do it standing in the pool, eyes
Mm.
open, eyes closed. And so what they're doing is bit by bit by bit, increasing the stress of doing it, because there's fear involved in doing all of that. The fear for them is like, what if I don't do it right? I'm going to fail. I'm not going to make it and become a SEAL,
Mm.
or alternatively, I'm going to drown while I'm down there.
Mm. Mm. In
And so we
psychology,
can
we
take that
actually,
same process.
yes, we call it systematic desensitization. So it's,
Yes.
you take it bit by bit, step by step. We usually use this technique as well for treating phobias. So,
Mm-hmm.
you take it little step at a time. So, for example, if you have fear of spiders, you don't actually throw someone in a pit full of spiders. well,
Right.
well,
Yeah.
there might be some for a verse. What I forgot the term for that therapy where you actually flood them with something that terrifies them, but with systematic desensitization you might give them a book that has pictures of spiders, and then the next step might
Yes.
be to be in the same room with a spider in a cage, and then maybe the next step is
Yes.
to come closer to the cage and maybe put your hand inside the cage or something like that. So step by step, and as you've said, yeah, with systematic desensitization, just little steps, and
Yes.
don't dive right in immediately.
Yes. And that is really important to understand, that doing it that way is not just okay, it's absolutely brilliant to do it that way. And for me, a lot of women who come to the courses who have already experienced some form of violence, like the last thing they want to do is to jump into a training where it's like, okay, how are you going to get out of a choke?
Oh
Like
gosh.
the just no thank you. Very triggering, re-traumatizing. Let's not go there. So being able to say, okay, we're going to start with a small step,
Mm,
and we're going to build from one step to the next, to the next, to the next. It's the best way to do it, and it is the thing that allows you to face something that you're scared of and gradually change your relationship to it, so that ultimately, if you're in a situation like that or any other, like, you've got confidence, and it's genuine confidence because you have built it. Like, it is not something that comes from like, oh, I don't worry about my safety, for example, because I have pepper spray, right?
mm,
That's false security.
mm.
But if you're like, I have actually gone through some training, I've done the work, I've done the inner, like,
It
emotional
works.
work,
Yeah.
I've done the mental preparation, and I've done the physical work to build some skills and build some responses, like, that is legit, genuine ability and confidence. And
Yeah.
that's what we want, right? We don't want it to be just theoretical. We want it to be real.
Yeah, and to when you are in that situation, you actually know, and you can tap into what you already know and apply it in that context. Well, Cynthia,
Yes.
I really would love to know more about what you do. If people want to connect with you and find out more about your training, where can they find you on social media, and how can they connect with you?
Well, I'm all over the place, but probably the best place to start is on my website. And it's just my name all smushed together. So it's cynthiajolicoeurrood.com. There's a whole
Awesome.
bunch of resources there. There's a webinar, there's a download, a free download. There's information about courses and how you can get in touch with me. And I mean, honestly, one of the things I love to do is just to have a one-on-one conversation. And often in those conversations, I can really help women, like, dig into a particular topic that they're concerned about and give some ideas about what they can do. So that's probably the best way, is just to go to that website. I'm also all over Facebook. Just look for Cynthia Joliceur Rood and you will find me. And I have the Born to Be a Badass Collective, which is my private group, where I post things and talk about things and have trainings and stuff like that. So that's another good place.
Awesome. Well, I'll put all the details in the description. So if people want to connect with you, they'll know where to find you. But this has been a
Thank you. I
really
should have also
fascinating.
mentioned, I don't want to interrupt, but silly me, here we are on a podcast. sort of a scenario. And I didn't even tell you that I have a podcast, which
Oh,
also
cool.
might be of interest to your members here. And it's the Born to be a Badass podcast, and it focuses on women, violence and safety, life after trauma, and how to build power and courage. So
Oh, wonderful. Well, I'm
that
sure
might also be of interest.
many of our members would be interested in tuning into that. Well, again, I'll put all the links in the description so people can actually check that out if they are interested and dive deeper. It's been a really fascinating conversation, and I feel really blessed to have this conversation with you, Cynthia. So my takeaway message for today really is, well, the first of all, the intuition bit is a highlight for me, because it's actually it's a feeling that comes to you that something is not quite right. Don't just brush it off. Respect that you have that feeling, and be curious and explore where that feeling is coming from. But at the same time, it's important to actually be able to have the skill set, the knowledge, the know-how on actually how to what to do when you are put in a situation like that, because you'll be able to respond better when you have all those tucked in your brain. You might not have to use those tools if you like, and let's hope that you wouldn't have to, but at least when the situation arises, you know that you can actually take that from there and use it when you have to use it. So thanks
Yes.
again, Cynthia, for joining us today. I really appreciate your time and expertise with us. And to those of you who are listening today, I hope that you found value from our conversation with Cynthia today. I'll leave the links in the description if you want to connect with her. And yeah, that's it for today. We'll catch up again next time for another purposeful conversations with me, Emmy, here in the Pami Code Facebook group. Until then, take care and bye for now. Bye. Bye.